The Golden Hour Birth Podcast, a podcast about real birth stories and creating connections through our shared experiences.
Childbirth isn't just about the child. It's about the person who gave birth, their lives, their wisdom, and their empowerment.
We're Liz
And Natalie,
the Golden Hour Birth Podcast, and we're here to laugh with you,
cry with you,
and hold space for you. Welcome to the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. I am your co-host, Liz.
And I'm your co-host, Natalie. And tonight we have Carman on. Carman is local to St. Louis, and we actually have a funny meet cute. Me and Liz took our families back in October to the pumpkin patch and then the brew house in Belleville. And Carman and I started talking to each other. And before I left, I was like, hey, you should listen to our podcast. She had a new baby. I was pregnant. So we started, of course, bonding over that. And then full circle a few months ago, Liz posted on Facebook about something, and Carman was like, I think I met your sister-in-law at the brew house. So now here we are. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, Carman.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share my story. I've listened to a few of the podcast, and there's just some crazy stories out there, and it's kind of nice to know you're not alone too.
So. Yes, literally, yes, the perfect 3 words. You're not alone.
Yeah.
So if you want to go ahead and share a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah, so my name is Carman. I married my college sweetheart. We moved to St. Louis together, and we have a son who is now currently 13 months. Kind of a crazy story on how all that happened. But yeah, and I am a nutrition coach, so I actually quit my job in February to fully take on nutrition and fitness coaching online. So that's a new world for me, but it's also allowed me to stay at home with our son as well. So
yeah. Oh, that's so awesome. Those, first formative years. That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, we've also had a wild ride for the first year too. So
yeah,
it's been crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as my story goes, my husband and I, we were together for 5 years, and we kind of decided okay, we're ready. And so we decided together that we wanted to start having kids. We both felt it was the right point in time, and we actually went to a Luke Combs concert, and it was the first time that we ever conceived was that night, and we ended up conceiving as well. So it was you think it's going to take a couple months at least, and you're pregnant. That was awesome, but what do you do? Honestly, I didn't know I was pregnant until the end of November, but it was the 4-week mark. I knew. We went on vacation, and it was right after Thanksgiving. We went to Disney World and Universal, and that one of those, I was tired every evening, and then one day I was in the shower, and I got out of the shower, and my husband was like, how do you feel? And I was like, I think I'm pregnant. And so we got home from the trip, and we got Chinese food, and then I went and took a pregnancy test while we were eating and just waited, and then I went and checked it, and I'm like, yep, I'm pregnant. And we announced it to our family at Christmas, just because it's a lot of people drink and stuff, and so it was early to tell them. But we didn't announce it to the world until I was 16 weeks, because honestly, that first trimester is so scary, especially because I don't know if it's because of social media or what, but it's you hear so much about miscarriages now that it's crazy. And so I was scared the whole time during that first trimester. I just felt scared. I bought 2 more things of pregnancy tests and kept testing too, because it's you don't even get to go to the doctor until you're at least 8 weeks to check for everything. And so yeah, I kept taking them because I was like, is this real? I don't know, false positives, how much does that happen? I don't know. So that's kind of my story as to the finding out process. And then as far as the pregnancy itself, when the first appointment, I was just so nervous just because I didn't know what to expect. And then the doctor whenever I talk to her, since, like I said in the beginning, I am now a fitness and nutrition coach. At my first appointment, she told me I couldn't do anything with a barbell anymore. And I was like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. Because it's like, how many times have you heard, like, don't stop the habits that you've already formed? So I'm like, if I'm doing this, why would I stop doing it?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we moved down here was because my husband was a CrossFit coach. That's what he started his career as. Now he's in medical sales. I guess I didn't mention that, but so he started as a CrossFit coach. And so he reached out to one of the coaches who was a coach when he was a coach, and she was pregnant at that time too. That way we could like make sure that, I was doing everything correctly while I was still doing it. And yeah, so and don't get me wrong, I like my OBGYN, but it's like, just with everything, there's some people who just don't know anything about that area. And so it was just like, do with it what you will.
Yeah.
And something that I feel like isn't talked about during pregnancy is like body dysmorphia. Like I so heavily felt terrible in my body. I like hated pregnancy, but also loved it because it's like you're growing a life, but it's also like, who am I? Like I've worked so hard to get to a certain point, and like now this is where I'm at. And my husband would always be like, you're growing a human. Like you have to give yourself grace. And it's like, yeah, but when I look at myself in the mirror, like I don't see me anymore. So I feel like not a lot of women talk about that, but it's like something that a lot of us struggle with. So just want to throw that out there. You're not alone. Like honestly, it's the wildest experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another thing too, with that being said, is like, I don't necessarily not want to have another kid, but like that is something that's in the back of my head that it's like, okay, well, I'm going to have to work so hard to, get that weight off again. But also it's like, okay, well, you can wait a couple of years and hopefully be in better shape, and then it won't affect you near as bad because it is what it is. So I don't know if you struggled with that at all when you were in pregnancy, but
I felt so shameful because I showed so early with my second baby. Like
I've heard
I
that.
I had a bump at like 8 weeks, 6 weeks, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not supposed to be showing yet. This is so embarrassing.
Yeah.
But why do we put ourselves through this?
I know. And it's like, does it really matter? Like you're carrying a grown human. Like, what's it going to do for you? To be so mean to yourself about it.
I know.
So, yeah. So, I mean, essentially fast forwarding to the end of my pregnancy, because like really my pregnancy itself was just fine. Like I didn't have any issues, had you see those Instagram reels or whatever TikToks that are like, you go into the OBGYN and it's like, how you doing? How's the heartbeat? You good? You have any questions? Bye. And like literally that's what it just so quick. And so that's what, I was having a lot of as far as that goes. And then, like I said earlier, my son was born on June 10th. So we had the baby shower literally the weekend before. It was, that Saturday, because I was like, I want to do it when I'm 30 weeks and I'm not, or almost 30 weeks, I guess at that point. But it was like, I don't want to feel like too hot because I'm pregnant and be outside and like have to deal with people when like that's the last thing I want to do. So we'll do 30 weeks. And then the Sunday we had our maternity pictures done. So Saturday, Sunday, and then Wednesday, it was June 8th, I lost my mucus plug, and I had just done research on mucus plugs because it was like on my apps, like talking about it, the bump or whatever. And so I was like, what is that? And so my husband is in medical sales, so he works at home part of the time. And so he was home that day, and I went to the bathroom, which was by our office, and I wiped, and I was like, I think I just lost my mucus plug. And he was like, well, how do you know? And I was like, look. And I showed it to him because I'm like, I don't know what this is. And I'm not sure what just came out of my body, but like it did. And here we are. So yeah, so I did a little bit more research after that happened, and like that it says you can lose your mucus plug early, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going into labor. So I was like, okay, I have an appointment on June 9th, so tomorrow. And so I'll just wait until the appointment because like I feel okay. I have a little bit of cramping and a little bit of bleeding, but they kind of told me that was normal throughout pregnancy. So I didn't know how concerned to be. But I bought everything that we didn't get on our baby registry like that night because I'm like, I feel something isn't right. So we just might as well buy the stuff and be done with it. And then, it was almost like you go into full on nesting. Like we just had the baby shower. Okay, wash the clothes, fold them, put them away, separate them by months, whatever. So yeah, I went on full on nesting mode. And then Thursday, like I went on a walk with my husband. I remember we ran into a neighbor and she asked me how things were going. And I was like, well, I left my mucus plug yesterday. So like, I don't really know. And she's like, you're out walking though. And I'm like, yeah, I feel okay. But like, I just don't know. But then as the day went on, I started to cramp more. And so it was just like, I'm glad we're going to the doctor, but I don't want to go to the ER just because it's like, that's an extra bill when we literally have an appointment. So we go in there and like we have the same nurse for every appointment. And she was like, your blood pressure is high. She was like, it's not super high, but like for you, it's definitely high. And I was like, well, I'm freaking out right now. And so, yeah, the doctor came in and she was like pretty calm at first. And she was like, this happens. It could be Braxton Hicks, blah, 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 which is also what I thought it could be. So I got like undressed and got into the thing and she comes back in the room and she checks me and she was like, yeah, you're 2 centimeters dilated and your cervix is 80% gone. And I'm like, oh, I'm 30 weeks and 3 days at this point. And I'm like, wow, what are you talking about? And she was just like, you're going to go to the hospital side right now. Like you're being admitted immediately. So, side note, I also forgot before the appointment, while I was in the nesting mode, I also packed my bag because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. My sister also had her daughter at 34 weeks. And so like, I don't know if that's even correlated or if like there's some kind of, gene that we both have that like makes it happen early or what. Just kind of crazy. Side note on that. But yeah, I was 30 weeks, 3 days. So my husband had to run home and like take care of our dogs and bring my bag. He forgot my glasses. So I had to wear my contacts all night long. I had like the worst headache while I stayed overnight. I was like, this is terrible. It's like I had my glasses case in front and the glasses right behind because I was like, I'm not going to pack them away if like I'm going to wear them tonight. And then it was like, just in a hurry, just like grab the case, not the glasses. So I was like, oh, God. Thanks for trying. I can't do that bad. No. Said like, I have a raging headache.
So, that sounds like my husband. I mean, he would totally just overlook it.
Yeah, it was just like, full on panic mode. And he like he started to make sourdough too. And so it was like just the beginning of sourdough. And so if you know anything about it, you have to like feed it every day. And so he's like, I need to feed my sourdough too. It's like running around the house trying to do that. And we had like a dog camera. And so I could see him like rapidly jumping around the house. I'm like, oh, he's in full on panic mode, which couldn't blame him. So also he was supposed to start a new job that coming Monday too. And so it was like, having to call, family as well as like the new employer, as well as like everybody. Cause it's like, we literally had no idea if we were going to have a baby in the next couple of days or if the contractions were going to stop and I'd just be put on bed rest or whatever it might be. So then they kept checking my cervix. Like at that point, it's like every time they check my cervix, they told me like, we need to check your cervix. However, every time I check your cervix, it also can like push you more into labor, but like we have to check it to see where you're at. And so, they did that as soon as I was admitted. And then I got put on like the medicine that was supposed to stop the contractions. They gave me like 20 milligrams of whatever it was. I don't remember what it was, but they tried to lower it in the middle of the night. And like I got up to go to the bathroom. And when I wiped, it was just full of blood. And so I like called the nurse right then and there and was like, you need to up that prescription because like I'm not doing well at this. And so they upped it again. And then the next morning they checked my cervix again. And I like put it off to the last minute, but they were like, we have to check you. We need to see where you're at. Like we can't avoid it at this point. Like we could put it off a little bit, but not very much. So they checked me and I was 4 centimeters dilated and my cervix was gone. So they had to transfer me to we go to SSM. I live in Wentzville, and so it's the St. Joseph, Lake St. Louis location.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to be transferred to St. Mary's SSM because they don't support babies born under 32 weeks. So from they came at like, I don't know, 9 o'clock or maybe it was 10 o'clock. I don't know. But it was a 45-minute drive in the ambulance. And my husband was behind me. And like afterwards, he's like, they were driving so slow. It's ridiculous. And there was a nurse in the ambulance with me. And I was like, do I need to tell you like how far apart my contractions are? And she said, you can if you want. And so I was. And she was like, oh no, if you keep doing this, you're probably going to have this baby in the next day. So lo and behold, it's actually 25 minutes after I got off the ambulance that he was here.
What?
Yeah. I got off the ambulance and I got into like the maternity side. It was like 10 minutes probably. And they were like trying to get all my stats and stuff. And my water broke while I was in the bed. And I like obviously felt it immediately. And so my water broke and then the contractions started and they were like super heavy and they rolled me to the other side. I asked for the epidural. So the guy, they were like, he's on his way. And they were like, but you're going to have to sit up. And I was like, I can't. Like, it was just like, it was happening so quick. I was like, I can't. So I was like, if I stay still on my side, can you just do it that way? And they were like, well, probably, yeah. I asked for it again. He still wasn't there. And at that point, they were like, I need to check your cervix again. Do you care? And I was like, I don't give a shit. Cause it's like at that point, when you're that far into labor, it's just, nothing matters anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then I started pushing. I didn't have time for the epidural, had to start pushing. And lo and behold, here comes my 30-week, 4-day baby who was 4 pounds, 2.5 ounces. So he was big for 30 weeks too, but still pretty small. And then, they asked my husband if he wanted to cut the umbilical cord. And like our chiropractor actually told us to like let it stop pulsing before you cut it, just because it gives the baby all the fluids, which I wouldn't have known. So that's the reason I wanted to say that. So we waited as long as we could since he was so early, because obviously they needed to do a lot of stuff with him. And then my husband cut the cord and we got some first pictures and like, we're both crying and we're like, he's here. Also our first dog's birthday is June 10th. So that's pretty cool too. They share a birthday. So, yeah. So then, it's like after I had him, I actually listened to somebody else's podcast saying like that they had the happy hormone going on. Cause like, I definitely did. Like my husband had time to call my parents and tell them like, hey, we're being transferred. And then they were on their way down and my parents were there probably an hour after I gave birth and like scared for me and the baby, obviously. Cause it's like, who expects to have a baby like naturally at 30 weeks? So yeah, it was just a very, very, very scary experience. And then Nathan, my husband's mom, drove down as well. So like we had all of them and like, I'm just happy. I was hungry. I got High Point literally right afterwards because I was like, I'm starving. Like I don't know what's going on, but so yeah. And then we had to wait like 2 hours before we could even go see him. But yeah, he was put on a CPAP machine pretty much immediately. The highest level of oxygen and support. And then obviously he also had a feeding tube. So we didn't get to hold him for 4 days.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was understandable because they had all the wires and cords in his umbilical cord. Just because that was the best place to get it at that point in time. But yeah, that was very hard. Sorry, I knew I was gonna cry.
There is nothing in this world that can prepare you for being a NICU mom and a NICU dad either.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. It's like, especially during the time, it's like, people found out that he was born, and then they're like, "Oh, well, my sister's cousin or whatever had a baby born at like 35 weeks," and I'm like, I get it, like that's premature. But, like, that's not 30 weeks.
Yeah. Did you ever find out the reasoning behind going into labor so early?
No, I asked. My placenta was sent off and tested, and they said nothing was wrong with it. So it was just like an oops, is what I was told. So I don't really know, but like that's another. We've talked about having a second, but I told him, I was like, I want to go and make sure we have a plan, because it's like once you have one, you're more at risk to do it again. And so I'm like, I want to know like the exact plan we have before you even think about a second child, to avoid it as much as possible. But like it also, she said to me at my 6-week checkup, they have had many successful women have carry full term after they don't. So high hopes, but it's like I'm still like at this point, like I need the exact plan.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Did they? Did your? Was your blood pressure okay
yeah, I didn't have
during labor and everything?
Yeah, my blood pressure is like, not to brag, but literally outstanding. Even throughout pregnancy, it was great. And so, like when the nurse told me I had high blood pressure, it was just like high for me. She was like, "This is the highest I've seen it on you," and like, it still wasn't very high, and there was no that's preeclampsia, right? And then what other one that's like you run risk of? Isn't there something else?
The HELP syndrome?
I don't know. I don't think so, but there's something else. But either way, like nothing was out of the norm of like why it would have happened. It just did. And so like, then then as a human, I just like, question if it was because I worked out, and like then I question myself, and it's like, is it because I did this, or I pushed myself too much to do this when I like was actually feeling good? And it is possible, but like it's not. There's women doing like way more weight and more movement than what I did. Like I did simple movements. It was just like I didn't give up the barbell. So it's like, you can't blame yourself, but you do essentially. So, but also like without an answer, it's like, how can you not, like I never was told like this was the reason that it happened. It was just like, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. So, that it's kind of shitty, honestly. But also it's like, if they wanted to run more tests, then who's going to pay for it? I am. And I don't got to do that. So, yeah. So let's see what. Obviously it was very emotional. Those first especially the first, few weeks of him being in there. But it was like, you ask all the questions. Like my husband was so annoyed with me of all the what if questions that I asked, mostly because it's like I asked them over and over and over again. But it's just like, I want to hear it. You have a new nurse every day. There's a new night shift nurse and daytime shift nurse. And so it was just like, I want to know if like they're all thinking the same things, essentially. To make sure that like, you know, he is coming home. And so that's was my biggest concern. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just a matter of when. And so it's like, okay. So, you know, everything was going really well for a while. And they like always tell you when you're a NICU parent that like don't expect them to come home before their due date, which his due date was August 15th. So he was 2 months and 5 days early.
Yeah.
So yeah, so like that's what they said, but then he was like looking so strong, and it was kind of again shitty on the healthcare part of it because they kept saying to me like there's going to be a setback. Like he's going to have a setback. And so like but no parent wants to hear that, and especially because he's like so strong. It's like you're coming in here and saying like, yeah, he looks so great, but like something's going to happen and he's going to have a setback. And it's like, why would you say that to me? Like that's just not nice.
Yeah,
Say to a new
he's the
parent.
exception.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was a setback, so it's like they were right. It's just like they could have, you know, said it not so bluntly. I don't know, when you're going through such an emotional time, and especially as a woman, like my hormones were out of whack as it was. Like I don't need to hear you talk like that about my son.
Yeah.
So he like, you know, with the NICU too, it's like they're up every 3 hours, and then they have to either take a bottle or take the breast by, like all feedings to be able to go home. And so like I was breastfeeding too. I did it all. And especially with them being that young, one of the nurses told us that you pretty much have to, like give them breast milk until at least 32 weeks. Otherwise, like they're not going to do well. So they will, if like a mom chooses not to breastfeed, then they'll just do the, donated breast milk for those babies that don't have it just because they need it so bad. So yeah, so I breastfed and I pumped for a long time. And, then, you know, you try breastfeeding there. And that's the one benefit I would definitely say that NICU offers is like the lactation consultants are always there to help you through breastfeeding. And so like I've heard so many women say how hard they have it like to get a perfect latch and, you know, whatnot, just because it's like their hospital stays 2 days. Whereas it's like I'm at the NICU every single day and these lactation consultants are coming down and like giving me advice with the pumping as well as helping me through all of like actually seeing him breastfeed and being able to guide me through it. So that was really cool. And then also you could only have like, it was still COVID, even though it was 2022, it was like still COVID rules as far as the, like we could only have 2 visitors in the room that weren't mom and dad. And mom or dad had to be with the visitor at all times. And that's a day. So like every day you could switch it out. But yeah, so they actually didn't tell us that for the first couple days. So my parents were there for 2 days, and my mom went in first and saw him, and then my husband's mom went in and saw him, and then my dad tried to go in and they were like, no, because you can only have 2 visitors. But they never told us that the day before. And so like they were leaving, and it was just like emotional for my parents too, because it's like my dad didn't get to see his grandson before he left because COVID, essentially. But I mean, if they, especially with them being that young, you know, I can't say it doesn't make sense, but it's just like, tell us the rules, people. Like we need to know this. And Nathan's mom, she literally would not touch him. So it's like you have to do the whole scrub down to even go in there. And then her hands were like behind her back and she just like look at him, and that was it. And so like she felt bad because my dad, you know, we named him Augie Michael. My dad's name is Michael. And so it was emotional for him, and it's his first grandson. So
Yeah.
But yeah, so then he did have the setback. So it was actually July 4th of last year, and they had like one of those, or I think every NICU has it, to where you can like watch your baby if you're not there and see the camera on them or whatnot. So like we were kind of watching him, and like people kept coming in and out, and then the next morning I got a phone call really early. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was a NICU nurse, the night nurse. And she was like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that, I'm putting Augie back into the incubator." And she was like, "He's not regulating his temperature, so he just like needs a little bit of heat. Like, I've tried everything. I put like double clothing on him. He's just like having a hard time. And so I think that this will help." And so I'm like, "Okay." And we plan on going there early in the morning anyway, just because like we were planning on going to lunch and like kind of trying to enjoy as much as we could the holiday and then, go back to the NICU. Um, so it's a 45-minute drive for us to get down there. And, obviously we're there every day. So, we were like sitting there watching, and it was like right when the day shift and the night shift were switching out. And the night nurse was like telling everything about Augie's stats and whatnot. And like we were just sitting there watching him, and they left and went to the next baby to go like give the shift change information over to the other nurse. And his like heart rate started to drop. And like the machines, like if you've ever been, I'm sure it's like every machine, but in the NICU, they ding like really loud, just because nurses are taking care of multiple babies and they're all in individual rooms. Sorry. And yeah, so it wasn't dinging at all. So like no nurse was coming in, but like you could see the other babies that the nurse had on the monitor. It was just like smaller. And so we were like, if it was a problem, somebody would come in here, right? So we like sat in there for a while, and then the day shift nurse who was taking over came into the room, and she was like, "Why are his machines not going off?" And she like was very mad, and we just were standing there. Like we weren't even close to the machine. So she knew that we didn't touch them, and somebody had turned the machine sounds off. And so his like levels were dropping, and yeah, so we never found out who did it, but like he was in trouble, and he had to get put back onto the CPAP machine, oxygen. They had to run a bunch of tests, and it turns out that he had a UTI. But because it was so little, it affected his entire body instead of like, us as grown adults, it doesn't do that. So, yeah, it was just literally everything. And his CPAP machine had to go back in, and he had to get the feeding tube back in. And so honestly, her name is Kayla, and I am so thankful for her. She was like on it. She was calling everybody. Like we were watching her standing there, and she just was incredible. We went to lunch after finding out what everything was and what everything happened. And she called me and she was like, "Don't come back here. Like, he's fine. Like, I promise if there's any updates, I will call you directly, but like, don't spend your day like this. It's not what we want. Like, I promise I have it taken care of." And she actually, on that camera that I mentioned, she posted a note on there with Augie. I'm trying to find it real quick. It says, "Sorry I scared you this morning. I'm feeling much better now. Mrs. Kayla keeps telling me I need the CPAP, but I'm proving to be stronger than she thought. Can't wait to snuggle tomorrow. Miss you, Augie dog," because that's what we call him. And so it was
so sweet.
nice to like have, somebody who cared that much about our son to do that for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were devastated because it's like, now when is he coming home? Like,
Yeah.
so he did do really well with the antibiotics, and like the doctor came in and reassured me like he's gonna be okay. He was then able to come home July 10th. So he was literally in the NICU for 1 month. And especially for being born at 30 weeks, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
A lot of the nurses said that just they could tell that, I ate healthy during my pregnancy and that I was just healthy in general just because of the way that my breast milk was. And so I wholeheartedly feel that, the supply that I gave him is what helped him be so strong to be able to get out a month before his due date even, and only a month being into the NICU. So I was definitely thankful for him being home. But man, was it a struggle after that? Just because it's like now I have to adjust to a baby being home when it's like you were doing, 3 hours. I was waking up every 3 hours to pump, but it's like it's different when it's an actual baby too. So cool. Yeah, he was up like every 3 hours for the first couple months, and he was gaining weight. Like anytime he took a bottle, we were supplementing with formula as well, just because that's what we were told to do. And then he was home for like at the 4-month mark, he just like was not gaining weight at all. And so like we struggled, we had to like go back for weight checks and he still wasn't gaining weight. And like I was worried. And so like my doctor and I had to have a real conversation about switching to just fully formula. And I was like honestly heartbroken because it's like I've tried so hard to do this and like I can't supply enough for him. But like at the end of the day, it's like he's fed. He's happy, he's healthy, he's gaining weight, and that's what needs to be done. So yeah, but the formula that he was on, I think, was giving him really bad reflex. So that was our first problem when he was home, was like super bad reflex. Like we couldn't do tummy time at all because it was like, even if you did it an hour and a half after he ate, it was just like, as soon as he laid on his belly, it was like coming out of his nose and he was choking. And it was just like, what's going on? Like, what am I doing wrong for this to happen?
Yeah.
Like we weren't getting any information from the doctors either. Cause it's like, you call and then it's like, you talk to a nurse who's also sending the message to the doctor to send it back to the nurse to send it to you. And so it's like, I think that things are being misconstrued because they're like, oh, well, don't lay him down after he eats for 30 minutes. And it's like, I'm doing that. And he's still having issues. So I had to do my own research and like I took him to the chiropractor because I've heard that that's really good for those types of issues. And like I went to my chiropractor throughout the entire pregnancy and he does babies as well. So we formed a really good relationship with them. And then I also started doing solids at 4 months just because, I mean, like he didn't even give any cues, but he could sit up on his own. And so like, I got to do something. And everybody's saying that once they start consuming the solids, the reflex usually clears up a little bit. So I did that. And then, the Similac Neosure formula, the research on that showed that like it causes some stomach issues and like can tear the lining. And so I'm like,
Oh my God.
Part of the issue. And so then it's like, what do I switch to? Like, I don't know anything about formula. So I had to do the most research ever. Like, if you, as my husband, he's like, you could just like be a doctor at this point because you just do so much research on all this stuff about babies. But it's like, what else am I going to do? Like, I'm not getting the answers. But I switched to a European brand of formula called Kindamil, and it's made from like whole milk or whatever. So, he did really well on that, and the reflex started to clear up. We had to go to gastroenterology though, and like we had to go and get tested. We had to get an ultrasound to test for pyloric stenosis, which is like when there's the tear actually is there, and so it just like it's actual surgery that they would have to go into because they just projectile vomit. Which I didn't think he had that, but it's like, you had to do everything to rule everything out at this point. So, yeah, so we had to do that. It was terrible. And then by the time that we actually got into the gastroenterology appointment, they're like, well, it seems like it's cleared up. So good job, Mom. And it's just like, thanks. I appreciate the help over there. So, and I called them earlier too, and they're like, well, he's not an established patient, so we can't give you any information because of legalities or whatever it is. And so it's just like, okay, so yeah, but anyway, it did end up, it ended up clearing up, and he's almost 30 pounds now. So he's a big boy. He's doing well. He loves to eat. But then in like January or February, I noticed one of his legs was bigger than the other. And it was just like, he was starting to stand up a little bit more. And so I was just like, looking at him and I'm like, his leg is bigger than the other one. And one day my husband came home and he's like, I tell him that, and he's just like, what? And I was like, I measured them. Like, I literally took a measuring tape and I measured them. And I was like, it is. It's like a whole inch bigger. And then we measured our thighs and we're like, is our legs bigger too? And we just like have never noticed it. And they're not though. And so I like waited because it didn't seem to bother him. And, I'm like, maybe I'm just being crazy. Like because I have had all these problems with him already. So like maybe I'm just overthinking things. So I waited until his 9-month appointment, which was in March. And I voiced my concern to the doctor. And I was just like, yeah, it's like it seems like it's a little bit bigger than the other one. And so she was like, no, yeah, I agree. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And she's just like, she like couldn't come up with an answer. She was just like, I definitely agree that it's bigger, but I'm going to have to think on that one because like she said something about hip dysplasia and like thinking that it might be that. So, yeah. And it just was like, kind of like, okay, maybe this actually is a problem. And, I had done research prior to the appointment, like whenever I first noticed it and kind of drove myself crazy, which is why I was like, I'm not going to say anything. Like, there's no way that this is it. Because it's called hemihypertrophy. And if you Google it, the images are literally atrocious. Like, it's just so scary to look at because it's like literally one leg is like a stick and then the other one is just like ginormous. Like, it's just grown so much. And yeah, so it was just like, that's not it. Like, there's no way. And then she called me later after the appointment and she was like, okay, I'm about to give you a lot of information, so you need to write this down. You need to call ortho tomorrow morning and get an appointment with them to check for hip dysplasia. You need to get a hip x-ray done before going to the appointment. And then also I'm going to have you have an appointment set up with genetics. I'm like, what? And like, she's telling me this all over the phone and like giving me phone numbers. And like, I'm like, okay, so what could it be? And she was like, are you freaking out yet? And I'm like, yes. Like, and so the thing with hemihypertrophy is, just to like explain it a little bit more, it's an overgrowth of bone or soft tissue. And it can be isolated or it can be across like the whole one side of the body. It's literally 1 in 11,000 births. Lucky me. I've had a great first year of parenting. And so, yeah, it essentially, it puts you more at risk for childhood cancer. Stomach tumors is what it can cause. And so, yeah, so like I'm doing all of this research on my own to like see all this stuff before I can even talk to anybody because it's like I actually just had my appointment with genetics June 20th and I voiced my concerns in March. So like that's a long time to wait and, do your own research and put the worst of the worst in the back of your head.
Yeah.
So we got to ortho sooner and they said that his hip was in place, but it was like underdeveloped compared to the right hip because his left leg is the bigger leg. And so they said that they didn't really think that was too much to be concerned of as far as hip dysplasia goes because it's like it's in socket. And so like that's what they are looking for the most. And then as far as he said that it was hemihypertrophy. So now we are supposed to go back to ortho in 6 months from when our appointment was to make sure that his legs are continuing to grow the same length and they're not outgrowing one another. Just because of the hemihypertrophy being like an overgrowth of bone, it could potentially do that. So we were like, I was then freaking out even more because it's like, it is hemihypertrophy. And like I told you, those images that you see are crazy. But the ortho guy told us that, it wouldn't get any worse than what it is now. So I was like, okay, that makes me feel a lot better. But like, also, what about the other part of it? Like the cancer part? So we had to, before we went to genetics, like just from our pediatrician, she was like, I need you to go and get an ultrasound done on his stomach. And then also he has to get blood work done. That way we can test some level to like make sure that it's staying at a low level, essentially to make sure that there's no cancer or whatnot. So yeah. So he had that ultrasound done in March. We did that. And then it was fine. They didn't find anything abnormal. And then we went to genetics in June. It is hemihyperplasia instead of hemihypertrophy is what the genetics guy told us. But man, those genetics appointments are crazy because you have like a geneticist or a genetic counselor come in first, and she asks questions about your history, like how many siblings you have, your parents' history, how many of your parents, like what's their health look like? And like my mom is one of 6 and my dad's one of 7. I'm like, I don't know what their health is like. I'm sorry, but like I don't keep track. It's too many people. So yeah. And so it was like honestly annoying because it was 45 minutes of questioning that we were like, we could have answered this on a computer. And because we were at that appointment from 9 to noon that day. So it was a long day, especially with a baby. It's like, I pack snacks. This is crazy. So yeah. So then we talked to the genetics doctor, and he told us it's hemihyperplasia, which is somewhat like hemihypertrophy, but it's an overgrowth of the cells instead of the bone and tissue. And so it's just like his cells are big, is what he said to us. He said that it could eventually even out. But for now, we still have to do the ultrasounds and the blood work to test for the tumors every 3 months until he's 4 for the blood work. And then the ultrasounds are until he's 7, because that's when the childhood cancer is like diminishes, I guess. But yeah, so it's been a wild first year. And at first, whenever I heard that information, I was like very sad. Like for a whole week, I like cried every day, did so much research. But then it's like, he's happy, he's healthy, he's happy, and he has no idea what's going on. So like, why be so upset about the unknowns when like it's not here? Just enjoy it. So
Yeah. That's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah.
How are you doing overall with all of these unknowns and everything that you've already gone through in this 1 year?
I'm emotional, but honestly, I'm good. He's the cutest kid. He really is. Like every time anybody sees him, they're like, "You should be a Gerber baby." I'm like, I know. He's so cute. It's ridiculous.
Oh,
He's so happy. So just the fact that we're in a blessed situation to where I could quit my job and pursue a passion that I have, because like I did hate my job. And that's why, because of him, I was like, I can't show him that it's okay to be in something that you don't like. And so like, not only did I do that, but like now I get to watch him grow. But I tell you what, this past week I've been like looking into preschools because I'm like, those wait lists are no joke. They are no joke. Sign up now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is it's like, which I didn't mention, but it is like, because he's 2 months behind gestational age wise, it's like all of his milestones are 2 months behind. So it's like, not only do I have anxiety over like all of this unknown stuff, it's like now I have to deal with like, oh, you want me to look at my son as now he's technically he's 13 months. So he's technically 11 months. And so it's like, he should only be doing stuff that an 11-month should be doing. And it's like, when does he go up, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I hate that there's such a stigma on the milestones too. Cause it's like, he doesn't really clap very well. And so I'm like, am I doing something wrong? You know, like you blame yourself because you're like, what can I do to help him? And it's like, he doesn't talk very much. He says, mama. Like my husband will go sit there. We'll both be like, dad, 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 dad. And he's never once said dad, dad. It's like always just mama, mama.
Oh.
And so it's like, you know, he's not really talking either, but it's like, okay, like when should I be concerned? So like, I think that's my biggest anxiety now is just like, you know, putting the pressure on myself on like, am I doing everything to make sure that he is where he needs to be?
I feel like you're doing so much more because you noticed probably like in some people's eyes, like a small thing of the legs. Like you have been his biggest advocate. So I think you're doing more. And if he doesn't know how to clap, he doesn't know how to clap. I'm not trying to like underestimate, you know, what he should do and everything, or like what you're being told he should be doing. But
Right.
like your husband said that you should be a doctor because you research so much. And I can tell like you are being his biggest fucking advocate. You are out there and calling all the people and making all the appointments.
Yeah. It's been a lot. Like 1 year. And we still think, hey, you want another one? Like, like honestly, it's like the fact that he brings us so much joy at the end of the day, that's really what we want to continue seeing, you know? And why it makes us like, okay, let's do 2. Let's see what 2 does. So it's still in the back of our head, but I'm like, maybe we should wait till he's potty trained and then we'll talk about 2. I've heard those boys are hard, so yeah. But overall, I would say like we're pretty happy-go-lucky about everything. Like we both have a pretty good spirit. Honestly, like starting the business and stuff, we've been so busy with that too that it's like, I'm sure you guys know with the podcast, it's like making the time for it, especially staying home with a crazy 1-year-old who's walking around like crazy. It's just like, when do you get things done?
Yeah.
When you figure it out, let me know.
Yeah, I will, because it's not happening right now. And like I said, like I put him on a wait list, like literally when he was born. I was like, yeah, I need to be on that wait list. And it was until the end of this year. And like they don't allow, because like I'd like to do a part-time daycare for him or something to where it gets him involved with other kids, but also it's like I don't need full-time. I just want like a couple days to where he's off my hands and I can get some stuff done. But they won't do part-time until they're 2. And so I'm like, what?
That's weird.
So yeah. And then it's like for preschools, it's like, holy cow, how do you get them in a preschool? Literally. Because unless they're like in the daycare that offers preschool, I really don't know what you do with that. So that's my biggest concerns now is just how do you get them involved in the school system?
Yeah,
So,
there's got to be like play groups and stuff. But have you looked into like first steps or parents as teachers coming out?
yeah, so we did an evaluation with First Steps just because we qualified, because you qualified, you know, if they're on oxygen for 72 hours, amongst other things. But that was our reasoning. And that was at 7 months. And, you know, the social worker came into our house and she said something to me about like he has to be 3 months behind. And then yeah. And then the physical therapist, she called me and asked me like when she could come, and I'm like, yeah, he's not 3 months behind, but you're still gonna come because I want you to tell me everything that I need to be doing with this kid to make sure I'm doing any and everything. So yeah, and then parents as teachers, I haven't looked into yet. I've looked into it, but I haven't signed up for it. But yes, I did look into that as well because it's like,
Yeah.
you make sure, you know, that everybody else, like the doctors, when we went to the genetics appointment and whatnot, you know, the genetic counselor, she said that she specialized in milestones and development before she came into genetics. And she was like, he seems great. And so, you know, it's just like the worry that I put on my back that my husband thinks is the most annoying fucking thing that ever seen. But yeah, so essentially it's just like I put the anxiety on myself, and I know that, but it's just like, my mom and sister too, they just have raised girls, and so they don't necessarily know the difference that boys and girls are, and then everybody else is like, oh, boys and girls are so different, like you can't compare the two of them. It's like, well, all I've seen is girls, so I don't really know what to say. So yeah, we're to the point now that it's like, let's just chill out, Carmen. You're being way too hard on yourself.
Yeah, he's still so young, and you paid pretty close attention. So I feel like you'll see something if it's 3 months behind or
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then, you got Miss Rachel over there, the best gal in town. Love her. Yeah. Yeah. She's great. It's like even at a certain point, she becomes background noise. Like you just don't even hear it anymore because it's just on. But it's like, I would rather have her on and him learn something than like put on some cartoon that like he's like, I've heard about that Cocomelon. I have my niece watches it and I'm like, I am not turning that on.
Yeah, I won't either.
Not even try it.
That's like our emergency backup. Like,
yeah,
because they're wild right now. I need you to chill out. So,
yeah, I've heard like once you get into it, you're not getting out. So I'm like, I'll just stick with Miss Rachel, and I do Bluey too. I love Bluey.
Bluey. I love Bluey.
Yeah. So actually, going back to Augie, so he started crawling like right around that 9-month appointment too, and he like doesn't crawl like a normal baby. Like even to this day, he tucks his leg. It's like in front of him, his left leg, the bigger leg, and he'll like put his right foot on the ground and just scoot kind of. And so I, when he first started doing it, my husband's like, is something wrong with that leg? Do you think that like, cause it's like, we just had the appointment about his leg being bigger. He's like, is something wrong? Like, is it going to hurt him if he does this long term? Or actually this was before the appointment, and I made him come and watch the Bluey episode where Bluey's crawling and it's like a race. You know what I'm talking about? It's like bum shuffle or something like that. She does like, I've watched it too many times. But it's like literally Bluey's like bum shuffling and she's not crawling right. And so I made my husband sit down and watch the episode with me, essentially, just because it's like a good learning lesson sometimes for parents too. Some of those Bluey episodes, I'm like, I love this show.
I know. So applicable to real life.
Yes, it is. Yeah. But yeah, so that's my story. I don't really have much else to it. I appreciate you guys letting me share it. It's just crazy to think that, first of all, I've listened to some of the other podcasts, and it's so nice to know that like you're not alone and whatnot. And like some of those NICU experiences, whether it's, in the moment, knowing that I was in there 30 weeks, it's like hearing somebody that was in there 35 weeks. It was like, it's not the same, but like, even though it's not the same, some of those individuals, that you've even had on the podcast, it's like, it's not the same, but like their situation was just as bad. So it's just like thinking about like I said in the beginning, you're just not alone in your entirety. And like in the moment you feel alone, and, then your baby comes home and it's like you get help from people, but you don't want any help because like your baby just went through and you went through something so traumatic that it's like, no, like, don't help me, get out. I don't want anything to do with you. You don't need the help. And now it's like looking back, I'm like, man, I really wish I would have taken some of that help because this is hard. But, we just actually started letting him, or not letting, but like trusting somebody to watch him, and that way we can go on date nights. Cause it's like at the end of the day, we have to mend our relationship too. Cause like that's something else that people don't talk about is how hard it is on your physical relationship with your significant other after you have a child. Like just because you have a whole nother human being that you guys are taking care of.
Well, thank you so much again for sharing everything.
Well, thank you guys for letting me share my story. It's a unique story. So I was like I would love to share it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Just again, like no one prepares you for that NICU journey. I feel like there needs to be like something out there, like the possibility of it. Like, let's talk about it.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's not talked about enough, honestly, because it's like my sister was there for both of her babies. And like the second one, like they were both born at 34 weeks, but one of them was almost 35. Her second one was almost 35. And the first one was 34 weeks and she was in there for a month. And then her second baby was in there for like a week. And so it's like, it really, every experience is so different too, that it's like those two girls, they had no similarities in their experience in the NICU. And so, but like, honestly, if I could avoid it again, I would do it in a heartbeat. So I'm going to try. But like getting to the OB, like my appointment for the OB, I booked over a month ago and it's not until September just because this is the up and coming baby boom right now. So
I know. Oh man.
Yeah, literally it is. Cause I'm like, oh my God, well, how do you have so many appointments booked that far out? So
yeah, I feel like we're going to like be the second generation baby boom. We're having those babies because of COVID.
Yeah, all them COVID babies coming out.
Thank you so much for joining us for Carmen's birth story. Feel free to join our Facebook group, the Golden Hour Birth Circle, and we will link Carmen's socials on the show notes, and we'll see you next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion and found it insightful and beneficial. Remember, the Golden Hour Birth Podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you. If you appreciate the content we bring you each week, consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform or sharing the show with your friends and family. Your support helps us reach more people and continue creating valuable episodes. If you have any questions, suggestions, or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us on our website, www.goldenhourbirthpodcast, or connect with us on social media. We value your feedback and want to make sure that we're delivering the content you want to hear. Before we sign off, we'd like to express our gratitude to our incredible guests who joined us today. We are honored that they trust us enough to be so open and vulnerable. We're grateful for their time and willingness to share their stories with us. If you're interested in taking the conversation further with us, join us on our Facebook group, the Golden Hour Birth Circle. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode, so be sure to tune in. Until then, stay golden and remember to take care of yourself. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Golden Hour Birth Podcast. Bye!